You know, exactly 3 days after I posted my virally popular video, Do Not Let Your Kids Play TF2, another forum poster by the name of Henry Poppendorfer voiced his concerns about another game just like it called Overwatch. The grammar is dodgy, he capitalizes and emboldens random words, and this is very clearly bait, but I don't care, so let's read this. I was extremely distraught upon my return from my 4-year missionary trip protesting the apostate churches in the Dark Continent to find my so-called son has not only taken up being a distinguishing Quaker, which is only a hop, skip and a hellbound jump from overtly promoting terrorism, but he has taken up this newer game called Overwatch. Let me tell you, I just about had a heart attack all over again when I saw it. Those of you with very small children wish to give them chores to do, that they might not be exposed to the wickedness that I share with you for educational purposes only. Just a handful of the sin I saw in Overwatch, put out by a company called Blizzard, behind the infamous Worlds of Warcraft game. In this game, women do battle, almost as their equals, in blatant violation of their station as homemakers, who submit properly to their husbands the way God intended. Revelation 17:6. It is very clear that this is a sign of the end days. Quote, "And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of saints, and with the blood of martyrs of Jesus."
It's not the baby Jesus.
Also, in the game, some robots are considered the equals of mankind, even after they have nearly wiped man from the earth. I would not believe that it needed saying that God alone set man, and men only apart from the animals, not robots. If God intended for the robots to be treated as mankind's equals, he would have done so from the beginning, or would have at least mentioned them. One of these so-called heroes is, so far as I can tell, some sort of God, forgive me for saying this, Buddhist, promotes not only meditation, but blatant pansexuality, throwing his balls in the faces of every other character. I asked my son what in the world that wicked sinner was doing, and he told me this flagrant promotion of sodomy was this man's main attack. Now that, I believe, because it was intended as an attack not only on my sensibilities, but also on my son's soul. I later learned that this hero, Zenyatta, which is probably a nonsense word that is the start of a spell. I suspect saying this out loud is almost certainly sinful, and better safe than sorry. Another young character, Genji, a talking gorilla named Winston, obviously an anagram of Sin Town, is not only one of the heroes, but a scientist who reformed this group of anti-Jesus crusaders called Overwatch. I can only assume God-fearing Christians in the game's lore put a stop to them. This is about as blatant an advertisement for bestiality and evolution in all the ones I've seen. At least since I returned to the Western world, where God pays attention. And let me tell you, he is listening, attentive, and steaming mad. Angry face. Decades of creation scientists proving the evolution dead wrong, and here Blizzard is promoting the ludicrous and blasphemous notion that we ought to start letting apes talk as if they have souls. Abominable. The game's heroes mock Christ and his angels by portraying Mercy, a so-called healer, into the game, as being angelic, even capable of resurrecting the dead, which is capable through Christ alone. Worse, this medic is female, in what I believe to be her mid-30s or perhaps even mid-40s, and she's not even married! To no surprise, but great disappointment, my son told me about a pairing called Mercy, where she is shipped with another female character, which means that fans promote sodomy using them. Typical. There is one sliver of hope, friends. A hero called Reaper seemed to me an entirely wholesome kind of man, who through, my goodness, God's love and redemption has taken it upon himself to rid the world of the other heroes, although I feel the title perhaps applies only to him. And of course to Jesus. Spurned on by the sodomites, he seems to have turned to the Lord Jesus Christ! He places these buggery-promoting, bestiality-loving, lucre-grubbing whores of Babylon where they belong, in hell with the rest of their kind. One of his voice lines even promotes the Holy Spirit by saying, "You look like you've seen a ghost," which I took to mean that they look like they have begun to experience the, oh my goodness, Holy Ghost's blessed presence. This part made me smile, but my son told me he was amongst the most disliked characters in the game. This world, sad face. My son tells me that Reaper, quote-unquote mains, people who play exclusively as him, are known as edgelords, and I thought that was a fitting name. People who give themselves over to the edge of God's sort of righteous judgment. Jesus Christ! Was himself an edgelord. As Matthew 10:34 tells us, think not that I am come to send peace on earth. I came not to send peace, but a sword. Ultimately, I do not believe the presence of one character doing the... Okay, my voice is starting to break up. Lord can make up entirely for a game which is otherwise jam-packed with promotion of sodomy, idol worship, one government promotion, vaccination, through a thoroughly rotten old Muslim hag named Anna, bestiality in a form of wicked onanism. Some people are shown in relationships with anti-Christian robots. Shocked face, angry face, come here face. I'm asking all parents, if you see your children playing Overwatch, do what I did. Drop a few magnets onto their computer case to magnetize the sinful data away and leave it washed clean. Then throw the magnet straight into the garbage and take it outside, that you might not keep your sin in the household. My son tells me that his computer is ruined! And I say good. If he feels I ruined it by removing sin and putting in parental controls the old-fashioned way, then clearly he has a lot of growing up to do. And I, his father, need now more than ever to be there to make sure that my son never plays games like this again. The next day, since the time when I first made that post on Team Fortress II thread, my son, who is now limited to playing on my lap for parental guidance, and knows that if he so much as mentions the Q word again in my house, he will have the sin taken from his hide. I think he meant skin, I'm not sure. Has shown me Overwatch more fully, so that I can better witness to those caught in its grip, and show how sinfully it truly is. In Overwatch, 12 Lost Souls compete for the honour of finding out which players will be snared more by the lies of atheism, one world government, techno-bestiality, and to no one's surprise, idol worship, all while engaging enough orgistic violence to make a whole new vineyard for the grapes of God's wrath. The heroes of the game each have unique abilities and backstories with which they blaspheme God! And there are, it seems, even more of these wretched lot on the way, to be released at a later date. I've already gone over a few of them in my original post, and have explained how only one of them seems to be any follower of Christ. However, I gave only a sampling. I had to truly stare this sin in the face to get a feel for it. As the sinners say, I had to get good before I really knew that the only thing any of these players main is an addiction to profligancy. It turns out that in the game, the heroes are members of an organisation which was called a titular Overwatch, a thuggish freak show of police force for a one-world government led by the UN. As if that isn't bad enough, they were destroyed once, but a talking monkey has called them back to trample on family values, the freedom to worship, my goodness, God! And general good taste once again. And this is all in-game. I will go through the characters left to right. I am a medical professional, and am used to seeing gruesome material, so my visual sin detectors are calibrated differently. Here's where we get to the juicy part. Benji Shimada is an abomination of flesh and metal, and a testament to the utter lack of respect for God's design and creation. Created by the game's resident quack Marcy, already mentioned, Benji can run fast, double jump, climb walls, and reflect bullets, but he cannot reflect the hellfire that awaits for him, or what is left for him for giving himself over to the worship of Buddha. Buddha being Count Dracula's dog. Junked Rat is an explosives-obsessed Australian who seeks to protect his worldly treasure from others because he has not built up treasure in heaven. Although God, in his wisdom, took Junked Rat's arm and leg to prove a point. The greed-blind hobo still has not turned from his ways. Toadhog is Junk Rat's bodyguard, and, if fan material is to be believed, his sodomite lover. Among sodomites, men like Toadhog are called bears, but also the perhaps more colourful and honest term, cum pigs. And I believe here the term is apt. Toadhog's primary ability is his tremendous corpulence and his hook. So I assume his primary job is to give Christian tetanus? I don't know. And to eventually act as a source of meat once the sinners start to eat one another. The fuck? Being foolish enough to be a sodomite, he doesn't know that tetanus is merely a means of being brought into the loving embrace upon death. Or that when the Lord's judgment comes, he will likely lose weight before it comes to cannibalism. The month May is a Chinese climate scientist whose job is to repeat the lie of global warming as loud as possible and as often as possible. She is considered by players to be the most annoying because her powers have to do with ice, and she is apparently the fattest character in the game, with Toadhog in a close second. Daria, named for the infamous butch lesbian cartoon of the same name, is a female Russian weightlifter who seems to have some sort of lesbian fantasy come hideously to life, not unlike the buff, communist version of its namesake, a nastier version of God. Carefully delineated gender roles which would not be hard to find. She is apparently only mained by advanced players. This I take to mean that players become more and more familiar with the worst elements of the game as they get more involved. Sarah is an Egyptian RPG user, the Grenade RPG, not the original let's get your kids addicted to witchcraft RPG, who uses a suit to fly about the map and shower enemy team with rockets. Although the game portrays her as security chief, it is very clear when playing with her that she represents an Islamic terrorist. Oh my god. It is unclear whether she is a mudslime or if she believes the ancient Egyptian heresy based on her tattoo, but since she has a tattoo and all, we know she cannot be a Christian. Oddly, she has one of the most Christian phrases in the game, referring to God's eventual judgment on those playing the game, and yet it is used by one of the most openly idol-worshipping characters. Tracy is a female British pilot, which is confusing since her character runs fast. Apparently at one point she went so fast that she became unmoored from time itself. So the talking ape had to build a device to allow her to stay in one place, but also blink forwards and backwards in time. She can blink back before she sinned? No, says Christ. Since the desire to sin is sin itself, as per Matthew 5:28, this is, of course, functionally necromancy, and in the real world, would have simply teleported her to hell for her hubris, which she could do with copies of this game, but won't, clearly to teach us a lesson. In this case, I believe the lesson that the game intends is the theory of evolution goes hand in hand with women's liberation. Even liberation from the rules of time and space gets set down by God himself! It is true that the wacko disproved theory of evolution has been the driving force for most of, if not all of the world's evils over the past 100 years, including perhaps the most pernicious of social evils, the lie of equality and feminism. So in this case, I am pleased that the game so don't know what it says, illustrates it. Even a clock damned to hell can sometimes tell the time correctly, even if it is out of loathing and hatred of God's design. Windowmaker is a French assassin who is bent upon destroying Overwatch, similar to our erstwhile hero from my original post. Besides that, she seems quite intent on stopping the evils of Robo-Buddhist. As I understand it, she killed her husband, which would put her in the running for the most sinful character in the entire game. But I also believe her husband actually ran Overwatch or something like that, I don't know. And all's well that ends well. I would like to see her and Creeper settle down and raise a God-fearing family in the final level of the game. Beaver, named for the colourful euphemism of a woman's shame cyst, as we in the medical industry refer to it, is a female Korean giant robot pirate, and is generally a complete brat with no concept of anything except her own pleasure. Her primary goal in life seems to be to illustrate the nastiest tendencies of loose young women, and to wear her pilot suit, tight enough to distract my boy from the ministrations of the Bible. Otherwise, she is a young, heedless delinquent who spends 25 hours a day playing video games and sitting on her keister doing nothing for anyone. Since this describes nearly 100% of the people who play this game, I understand that she is very popular as a vain example of self-insert gameplay. She is also a reference to Neon Genesis Evangelion, a Chinese cartoon that is explicitly about a gay boy in a giant robot killing angels trying to replace God. You can't make this stuff up. Or rather, you can, but if you do, you better believe God has a place for you in hell. Looks like D.VA is devoid of any wholesome influence, as are her players. Torbjorn, this builder character, is industrious, of a healthy Nordic complexion, and generally of a good cheer. He has also grown a well-groomed beard fitting of a man's station. While other characters destroy, he creates. You would think this would make him an ideal choice for a Christian gamer, not that such a thing often exists, right? Wrong! This Torbjorn is not only from Satan's holiday home of Sweden, but is also a clear adaptation of the mythical race of squat little degenerates known as dwarves. Ergo, this crafty little short stack is perhaps the worst character in the game, a gateway for industrious and hard-working children to get suckered into an interest of comparative mythology. And at this point, they may as well just go the whole 9 yards and declare themselves witches, or worse, congregationalists. My son is never playing as Torbjorn. Flat out. Creeper, the true hero of the game, is a man who, when he saw the wages of sin, turned away from the devil's lowly works and turned his attention to the Lord, undergoing a near-death experience, not entirely unlike Christ. Creeper returned and took after Jesus' example, bringing not peace, but a sword. Like the Holy Spirit. Creeper can move about like a thief in the night, and when he does arrive, he brings the fires of hell to pass judgment on the wicked gallery of sin. Why, I managed to illustrate 2 Peter 3:10 very well to my son using Creeper as an example, and for every soul he collects, his faith is that much stronger, and he gains life from them, in the same way that we gain life from the sacrifice of Christ, although he is far from Christ himself. Creeper is, after all, Mexican. As a stand-in illustration, I believe he is a healthy influence. Marcy, the devil in disguise. This wretched hag has the gall to resurrect others without once invoking the Lord Jesus Christ's name. Whatever I have said to the other characters, I say this now. She is doubtless the most sinful character in any media I have ever witnessed. A falsely modest, nasty, two-faced liar who would make Hillary Clinton blush. The most thankful part of this game is that she dies easily when not hiding like a gutless coward behind her brainwashed sin puppets. Marcy is a whore of Babylon, which is shown in the game itself. In the character options, players can play as her true form. Witness so that you will not be deceived. If your child is so lost that they claim to main Marcy, do them a favour and prevent them from playing games until they bear children of their own and can be woken up to the tremendous threat posed by characters like this. Zen Yoda is more of the same Buddha worship that we got from Benji, except with more ball slinging and free Tibet pinko nonsense. This robot hippie would have you believe that robots are like a people too, man, and actually experience feelings, or laughably, might have souls. As a comedian, Zen Yoda would be hilarious, but as a character, it is the same tired old sin, now in a similarly tired, rusty old package. What is there to say about him that Christ did not say already about the pagans? This floating little devil has one saving grace, that he is so devoid of anything even remotely interesting that his most stoned of hippie Democrats would even think to play him. Gonzo Shimada, an archer with a hate in his heart for his brother Benji. While this would increase his standing to me, my son informs me that his only job on the team is to press Q to summon dragons that kill the entire enemy team. So chalk this character up as really just an oriental warlord who exists to promote witchcraft as the answer to all of life's problems. I will laugh when God destroys him by turning the great dragon's back upon him and ignoring his too-late repentance. Grindhard is a German sex pervert in what I believe is a BDSM sex suit, who goes on and on about his big hammer. When I played him, at one point after hitting many enemies with him, he even openly states, "I am on fire." I cannot think of a more apt way of him to state that he is a flaming homosexual into buggery and sadomasochism. What cracks me up is that he states, "Do not worry, my friends, I am your shield," referring to condoms, obviously. And then he says later that his shield is giving out, at which point it breaks and his team is flooded with damage, clearly representing AIDS. Even when sinners are confronted with the reality of the situation, they still cannot see past the elements of the parable. Sintown, the talking ape who gave Tracy her time-changing gear, he jumps around, much like an evolutionist jumps from lie to lie to try and confuse Christians, and puts down temporary bubble shields, like how public school system shields children from the truth that God created all things. Sintown is the epitome of the modern scientist or professor, a godless monkey without a clue who acts as an enabler for his leftist thug buddies in Overwatch. It is a good thing for him that in the world of Overwatch the Bible does not seem to exist, or else Sintown might have to admit that his inventions are goofy affronts to Christ, and that his weapon is mediocre at best. No aim, no brain, Sintown main. Sinetra, an autistic like the has what she is right in her name. A Hindu who creates portals to hell that her team can pass through, and little imp-like sentries that can shoot wicked gouts of hellfire to slow, weaken, and ultimately kill her enemies. Passerbys, small animals, Christians, bugs, you name it. 2 of her custom skins are really just Hindu goddess outfits. There really is nothing negative I can say about her that will make you dislike her less than actually watching someone play as her. She is obsessed with order, probably because in India they lack And although she talks about hard light constructs all the time, that light comes straight from the lakes of fire. Soldier 66, a Vietnam War veteran whom I believe was struck blind by God for his arrogance. This former hero decided to turn his back on America, and was in fact the former leader of Overwatch. It seems that he went from fighting against communism to fighting for it, all in a matter of decades. Much like how Moses was not allowed to enter the Promised Land, or how in his old age King Solomon turned his back to the Lord. Soldier 66 sees everything with his wicked digital eyes, except for the truth of Christ. Casteron, an old military robot who believes in nature worship and will lead your children to pantheism and Wicca, all for Casteron granting them a brief moment of fame. You see, whoever plays Casteron automatically is what is known as the player of the game, to be celebrated and given praise at the end of each level, for having the foresight and lack of scrupulous to actually choose Casteron. Even among sinners, choosing him is a sign of slothful vanity. Lucifo, a Brazilian slumlord, and likely transsexual, who peddles electronic dance music to the children who play the game. If this game has a pimp of sin, Lucifo, like his namesake, fits the bill. Lucifo has two abilities to help his team. The first is Speed Boost, in which he gives amphetamines to his fellow players so that they will go faster. The second is Healing Boost, where he gives his jam to other players, all equally, promoting communism, free love, loose sex, and looser morals, to say nothing of the very probable miscegenation that occurred to make him, since he has no Brazilian accent whatsoever. Mickey, a tobacco-smoking cowboy, with a belt buckle reading BAMF, meaning badass motherfucker, which is bad enough when it simply means a mother who does not raise her children with love and discipline. But I assure you it's far worse when you know what the A and the F stand for. Hint, they're both cuss words. Mickey likes to fan himself with a hammer, I can only assume from Grindhard, meaning he is the bottom to Grindhard's top. I remember a time when American cowboys were men to look up to, but to see how far we have fallen really brings tears to my eyes. Lastly, there is a hero, more like Zero, not shown here. Annie, Sarah's mother, who originally taught her how to worship the goofy old idols of Egypt that the pharaoh was so into when he tried to prevent God's chosen people, well, at the time, from leaving. This old cyclopic crone fires darts of vaccines at her teammates, increasing their levels of autism so that they will ignore injury. Those same vaccines cause damage to her opponents who are mentally healthy, until the last of the damage from the vaccines becomes so great that they succumb to it. She can also throw pain medication, like the kind given to pregnant women, at her opponents who cause them to fall into a deep and unwholesome catatonic state, likely in the hopes that the Liberal government will pull the plug. Her greatest attack is to nano-boost a character, where she pumps them full of party drugs like PCP, caffeine, Ritalin, to make them trip out all over her enemies, to make them sexually aroused enough to ignore Christ's word. This has been Dr. Henry Poffadora's True Christian Post. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is why you should not let your kids play Overwatch. Bye, lads.
Thanks for watching. Get a load of his British banter, get a load of his crackly voice. If you reach this part of the video, baby, you made a really good choice. Maybe leave a like, maybe leave a sub, maybe write a comment about how much Peter is amazing. Peterscraps, king of the banter. Turn up the volume, start to accept that you can get enough of his British sass. So watch the next video, move your ass. This is now the end of the video. Tune in next time, off you go. Hope you enjoyed it, of course you did. Have a nice day, and this is it.
I'm singing about myself, what a sad loser.